my pride. Good morning and welcome to. Hold on a second. Take one quick break. Hello again and welcome to Dateline Hamden on WNHH-FM, your home for community radio at 103.5 FM, live streamed at newhavenindependent.org. I'm your host, Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make our community tick. Walter Livingston Morton IV helps make Hamden tick. He serves on the town's Board of Education. He's here to talk about that with us. Welcome to WNHH, Mr. Morton. All right, so now for some reason your audio isn't coming up. Hey, Harry, we can't hear him now. I am checking with our producer here, Harry Dross. You want to try it again, Walter? I apologize for... Yeah, he's not showing up. And I'm sorry about the technical difficulties this morning. We use a very smooth ship run here with the best station manager in the business. We're doing something high-tech now, which is plugging in mics. Mr. Morton, you want to say hello again?
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
All right, we're rolling.
Good to go.
All right. Walter Livingston Morton IV of the Hamden Board of Ed, welcome to WNHH-FM.
Good morning. Thank you. Happy to be here.
So you've been, your body, the Board of Education, has been in the news a lot lately.
Yes, we have.
Independent, and you've been doing your largest in a generation redistricting of your school system.
Yes, yes.
And it seems like it was for two main reasons. One is the state told you your schools are racially out of balance, and also because you got some financial challenges, you needed to find millions of dollars in savings, so you thought closing schools would help do that. Are those the two main reasons you guys were redistricting?
Well, I think it's about four things actually. I kind of created a perfect storm. Those two are certainly factors. The financial implications of how our district's structured. Also, we've had several schools that are, by the state's definition, out of balance or pending imbalance, and then there's debate or conversation we can have about the state's definition of what it means to be racially balanced.
That one's still blowing my mind.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and so we can have that discussion. There's also the fact we brought in outside experts to do projections for enrollment, and the next 10-15 years we're going to see a significant drop in our population of students.
That's so interesting because Hamden's population is still growing. I saw one estimate. I was reading some of the reports for your COPD, Conservation and Planning Development Plan for every 10 years. And it showed your population, according to one estimate, going up from 61,000 to 70,000 in another by 2030. So is it just a graying population? Families aren't moving in, or what's the deal?
Well, people aren't having babies like they were. Part of that being the recession and the sluggish recovery. Certainly since then in the state, and then young folks like myself, are going other places and having babies at a lesser rate. So while the town's growing, population-wise, it's not a lot of children actually. It's not
so you think you're not gonna need all the buildings?
Exactly. So part of it too is to better utilize our space within schools, and then the other dynamic, the fourth piece that kind of failed, was the lease with ACES for the Wintergreen building. Is at the end of this summer will be the end of its 20-year lease. So that was really four things that kind of contributed to.
So tell me if I got this straight. The main thing that happened with the plan you approved in late December.
Yes.
was that you closed two schools, Shepherd Glen and Church Street.
That's correct.
You decided that you were going to try, this is still pending, I believe, unless something's happened I hadn't heard about, that the Wintergreen School would no longer be leased to Wintergreen, which is a regional magnet, but instead be used for swing space as you move stuff around with Hamden schools?
So, Shepherd Glen Church Street closing, correct. The Wintergreen building we plan to reincorporate into the district and do something very interesting there. And the other portion is also moving all sixth grade to the middle school.
Right.
That's a big portion of it as well, because now that opens up extra space within the remaining elementary schools to offer universal pre-K. So our schools will now be pre-K through 5, and then we will have
and they're not now.
And they're not now, correct. It's just K through 6.
Mm-hmm.
And Church Street and there's one other school that has a very small pre-K, but it's not universal by any means. But we would have pre-K through 5 at Wintergreen, and then the other half of the school will centralize our IIC classrooms, which are special education classrooms, which now are spread throughout the district. And one issue that we hear a lot from parents and educators is that your neighborhood school might be, for example, Dunbar Hill, but you have a child that has special education needs. He needs to be in an IIC classroom, he or she. That doesn't mean that he'll go to his neighborhood school for that classroom. We could send him to Ridge Hill, or we could send him to Westwoods. And that, lack of continuity with, same staff and the services offers detrimental to the education process. So centralizing those students in one building, and also.
So that's what's going to happen with Wintergreen? It's going to become the special ed school building?
It's going to be half and half. So it's IIC classrooms will be there, and then we will have pre-K through 5 in the other half.
For which school?
For Wintergreen, because it's a large school. It's something 600 plus seats there, so it would allow.
But Wintergreen's the magnet. They're going to continue staying there?
No, not, because the plan is to take the building back. So ACES, should they decide to continue the Wintergreen, if you will, magnet school program, they will have to find another location, either in Hamden or.
So what school moves there?
Into Wintergreen. So that's going to be pre-K through 5, and then the IIC class.
Well, what's pre-K through 5 means to be a new school called Wintergreen School?
I guess it would be called. We haven't come up
but is
with
that
the name yet.
The people who used to go to Church Street and Shepherd Glen will go there in a consolidated school?
That's a possibility. The district, or excuse me, the board, we haven't drawn the lines, if you will, exactly for where the students are going to go yet. We voted on the broader pieces, right? Which take Wintergreen back. We'll put K through 5, pre-K through 5 there. IIC, you move 6th grade to the middle school. You would then close Shepherd Glen and Church Street, and there's going to be 2 inter-district magnet schools as well. So we've said once the building projects are completed, so we're going to be doing a building project for Westwood School, and then we're looking to do a building project for Dunbar School. Once those are finished and students are then able to make all the moves, and we do the addition at the middle school.
So you're creating 3 schools and closing 2?
Well, closing 2, adding 6th grade to the middle school, and taking back Wintergreen.
But that becomes a school that doesn't exist now.
So that would be adding.
And you said there are going to be 2 interdistrict magnet schools.
Exactly. So we're going to take 2 schools that are now currently K through 6.
Oh.
And they'll become pre-K through 5, and we'll turn them into interdistrict magnet schools.
Oh, and that's Westwoods and Dunbar Hill.
Exactly.
But a lot of shuffling around. In the end, do you think it went well? Is this what you wanted to see happen?
I'm excited. I'm optimistic. I'm glad to see. First off, we got a great turnout from the community. A lot of people came to the meetings and took part of it, which is, it's refreshing. Usually the folks on council are big time and get all the attention with meetings, but it was great to hear from the community and get feedback and input around what we should do. One, everybody in Hamden was really great and understood the importance of having schools that are racially balanced, right? I mean, there's moral reasons for being racially balanced, and then also there's benefits to students and staff for being in balanced schools that have population, and the schools look like the town and the world that we live in. So that was really refreshing to see a lot of support around that dynamic and understanding that diversity is an important part of Hamden. That's what a lot of people like about it. And so I'm also really excited too to see that universal pre-K is on the table, and how important that is to closing the achievement gap right here in Hamden, which we have a significant achievement gap, and we've had issues around that, and so does the state as a whole. But the most impactful thing you can do is how a child's educated up until the age of 5 really kind of sets the trajectory for that student. So getting students
what is the
earlier,
status of the achievement gap?
I know we're right around where the state averages. Don't quote me on numbers. I could certainly provide you for that, but it's a problem. And it's a significant gap, and it wasn't getting any better. It was actually worsening for a lot of
And you
reasons.
think pre-K will help university?
Pre-K, absolutely, that goes a long way. We'll go a long way toward that. Other steps that we need to take, and parts of the conversation that we're having now about, hey, are students of color are underperforming? What are those reasons? And how do we, address that?
All right, and we're addressing that on Dateline Hamden today on WNHH, your home for community radio 103.5 FM. Here with Walter Livingston Morton IV, a member of the Board of Ed. So we're going to talk about diversity.
Yes.
So we heard from some parents who didn't like the idea that you were closing two predominantly African-American schools, saying they're not going to go to school in their neighborhood. They like those schools, and that the state's definition of racial balance is pretty screwy. So they count white and non-white.
Yes.
So you got one school, right, where Shepherd Glen, I think it is, where you had four different racial groups, main groups. You had Latinx, you had African American, white, and Asian American.
Yes.
And they were all roughly a quarter each, right?
Exactly.
Isn't that the ultimate racial balance? But because the state says you can't be more than 75, what is it? Can't be, you got it? Can't be more than 75 non-white.
Exactly.
So they took the most racially balanced school perhaps in the Western Hemisphere and said it has to close because it's not racially balanced?
Yeah, that was part of it. That the state's, kind of arcane definition of what it means to be racially balanced says that the school, which frankly has the greatest diversity and is probably the best reflection of diversity in the town, we're out of balance because there's too few white students. And even though we are a predominantly minority school district, about 63, 64% students of color make up the district. That school was out of balance. I mean, it's an incredible school, Shepherd Glen. I mean, there's something like 27 different languages spoken at that school. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. The other dynamic that went into closing that building, more so than the state's definition, was just the condition of the building as well. It's the condition and kind of the location. It needed a lot of work. It's on a small, plot of land. It didn't give us the type of room and the opportunities we were looking for to expand or do renovations. So kind of unfortunately, because of some of the financial considerations and just the dynamics of the school physical.
Is it a quarter? Is that correct?
It's roughly that. Yeah, it's roughly that.
And what does the state say? You can't be more than 10 or 11% beyond your population. So if it's a non-white,
yeah, you 63%. If you have too few or too many,
yeah.
So there's a range that they give you to be within, and because there's frankly too few white students in that building, it's considered out of balance.
But you don't think they're too few if it's four groups racially
Me
equal?
Personally, no, absolutely not. And that's a discussion we also had on the board about, having a conversation with the state about how they define, what is diversity, right? We know there's other school districts, Groton, for example, and I believe Stanford, when they were going through a similar process, applied for special diversity status, which was basically a waiver to say, hey, this is, because of the makeup of our district and other things, your definition doesn't fit.
So why didn't you do that?
Issue. Well, because we ended up, then closing the building because of the physical state of the building and work needing to be done. So, but that's certainly a conversation I know board members and folks on council want to have and say, hey guys, when I'm saying the hey guys, the state, some issues here with your definition and how you look at it,
But you said you are optimistic about the plan you guys approved in part because you think there'll be greater racial diversity. So if that was a fail under the definition of racial diversity, what are you optimistic about?
Well, I'm optimistic about the intradistrict magnet schools and the universal pre-K. That will go, I think that's a more effective way of balancing the schools racially. I mean, and this part of the problem, with the neighborhood schools and how they're set up is that people in this country, in Hamden, let's talk specifically about that, still kind of live in a segregated manner, right? For reasons outside of the board's purview. So when you say, hey, you live in this neighborhood, your kids are going to go to that school, well, unsurprisingly, the folks that attend the school look like the folks in the neighborhood. So, inherently, because there's segregation in how people live, our neighborhood schools suffer from that. And drawing district lines and saying, well, you're on this side of the street and, or you're in this neighborhood and we'll cut you here and there may temporarily get you to a level of let's say balance in the school, but it's rough, it's not convenient depending on where you live, and it's not sustainable because the moment we draw a line today, somebody moves tomorrow, right?
And you said so. Two schools are are going to become interdistrict magnets, and then you
Yes.
think that's what people go. Are they going to have themes or?
Exactly. So the tentative plan and the board of the central office is working on that at the moment of, okay, well, how do these interdistrict magnet schools work? What do they look like? We've talked about having a fine arts program and a STEAM academy, science, technology,
Mm-hmm.
science,
And what
technology.
year would this all start?
Um, it's 2 year to 2021 when the building projects are complete. The biggest piece being we have to have the addition at the middle school.
Right.
So we can move all sixth grade students there.
Now, obviously, in the history since Jefferson O'Neill in the '90s was a case in Connecticut that the state Supreme Court ordered desegregation of schools. They dealt with the very same issues you're dealing with right here in raising, which is that housing segregation and factors like that beyond the control of a school board create the conditions that lead to racially segregated schools. And a school board does not have the power to order neighborhoods to be desegregated. So as a result, you come up with solutions like regional magnets rather than neighborhood schools. You get a backlash to that. Some people say, my kid does not need to be next to a white kid to learn. My kid should be able to go to school near the neighborhood. And in New Haven, people say it's created this patchwork where everyone fights for slots in certain schools rather than, I don't know if this is really a choice, rather than making the effort to make all neighborhood schools good so that you're not desperate to go somewhere else. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, you bring up a great point in the discussions, I've had. I mean, I went to Hamden Public Schools.
Where'd you go?
I went to Westwoods, but I also attended Church Street for a couple year stretch. So, and my brother went there for his entire elementary school career. My sister went there for a couple years with me. So certainly wasn't a decision we made lightly, but that's a question I speak with my family members and other people of color in the community, and there's some who just say, is it really right to be doing these things to communities of color, to put them next to a white student, let's say, so we can say we're balanced, right? Is that right to these students of color who have a ton of issues coming into the door? Um, and I believe diversity is important, and I think there's a benefit for growing up in a diverse environment. I'm a better person because I went to diverse schools, and there were people who didn't look like me, and there were people who looked like me, and there was
And what's the reason for
similar
that? What made
experiences.
you a better person for that?
Just being able to interact with people from all walks of life, right? Different whether they grew up wealthy or poor, or somewhere in between, different what they bring as far as their culture and their lifestyle and their experience. And it's something I, growing up in Hamden, never really thought about it was what it was until I went to college and then the military, and I kind of took it for granted, and
Did you go to high school in Hampton too?
I did, graduated from Hamden High in '09.
And then where'd you go to college?
I attended Penn State before leaving to join the Army. And it's just I'm a better person for it. I'm able to go in places and interact with people and have appreciation for where they come from. I think that's important to have. But then there's the question too of some people say, hey, I like my neighborhood school. I'm happy with Church Street. Sure, we're oh, by the state's definition, there's too many students of color there, not enough white students. But we feel they're doing a good job and they're servicing us in this community. And so we're happy. So I mean, that's personally, I think diversity is important. It does mean something because we are a diverse country and we're only getting browner as a country. So I think it's good to have that. But I also understand folks who say, hey, well, let's just do a better job of educating students of color where they are. And then and I agree with that, but there's also certain things that come with it. I saw in even a debate around what we did in Hamden, I saw certain communities and certain neighborhoods, they were organized, they attended meetings, they had petitions, they understand the political process and had political capital that they, expended on this process to influence a decision. And the other communities that didn't have that experience, right? Perhaps that wealth, that time to be there.
In other words, this is what struck us as outsiders. We're starting to cover Hamden now.
Yes.
First thing that struck me is the student body is majority, as you said, people of color.
Yes.
But the parents who came to speak up at the meetings, including meetings of schools where most students are not white, were white parents for the most part. Even though when we visited the schools and met the parents who were black, they too felt the same way. But who attended? And who's making the decision? Like, you're African American, but isn't it true the majority of people making decisions for the schools are still white in a town where the majority of the students are not?
Well, at least on the Board of Ed, Yeah, there's two individuals, myself and Arturo, individuals of color, and
Out
the
of
other
how many?
individuals, 9.
So two
So
out of 9 are people of color, and the school system is 2/3 people
yes,
of color.
yes.
S- Is that just a time lag that's going to change?
I think it's changing. I mean, there's folks that are getting involved, from all walks of life, but some of that too is just the ability and the opportunity. I mean, I'm fortunate that somebody at a very early age kind of took note of me and got me down this career path, if you will. And yeah, I'm always looking for, as a black man, more people of color, more African Americans taking a role and, being involved and running for office. And I think it's a time lag. I think we'll get there. I will say that, despite, some would say, hey, there's a lack of diversity, on the board, the board of Hamden, Board of Education in Hamden, when it comes to the social issues and things about diversity, great group, always willing to listen and ask questions. And, when I have a seat at the table and, I speak about my experience, right? And what it means is not lost on me that I'm the only African American on the board. And they're always, very receptive and understanding of that and making meaningful effort, both the Democrats and the Republicans, despite, hey, well, there's white folks on the board. They are sensitive to the issue and willing to listen, and let folks of color like myself and Arturo kind of guide the discussions and offer our experience.
All right. And you're listening to Dateline Hamden on WNHH FM. Today's guest is Walter Livingston Morton the fourth. The fourth. So do you know the other Walter? Are there other 3 still alive?
Well, my father is. My grandfather and great grandfather I never had the chance to meet, actually. But yeah, I come from a long line of Morton. So
And Hamden, how long?
My grandmother raised my father in Hamden. And so, here we are.
And you decided to settle in Hamden. At the beginning of the show, you talked about a lot of people your age. And how old are you?
27.
A lot of people your age have left Hamden and Connecticut. Why did you return to the town where you laid down roots?
Maybe I'm too stupid to leave, but I love Hamden. I mean, I grew up here. My family's here, my friends, my community, and Hamden raised me, so I feel a certain level of indebtedness to give back and try to contribute. It's how my folks raised me. You be thankful of where you came from and never forget where you came from, but then also to always give back and never take things for granted. So I'm trying to do my part to, be involved for a little while as an elected official and contribute to the district.
And you also got involved in elections. You told me for one year that you were on the staff of Dateline. You said you were head of advance?
I was for up until, the campaign ended. And I've just always been involved I understand the importance of being engaged civically. And something my father always said, he was like, hey, Walt, don't talk about it, be about it. So instead of kind of complaining about how things are going or saying this isn't right or there's, it's not going in the right direction, I said, I want to do my part, small part, to get involved and try to make a small difference for a while before deciding to go on. But I like Connecticut. I think it has a lot to offer. I think it is a great place to live and raise a family. We do have issues, as a state and even as a town that I want to be a part of the solution and not just say, hey, things are kind of going to hell, let me move elsewhere. I don't think that gets us anywhere if everyone leaves, right? I think there's things worth fighting for and, trying to be a part of the solution.
Don't talk about it, be about it. I like that.
Yeah.
Did he make that up or is that?
I don't know if he made it up or he got it from someone,
one.
but a lot of times, complaining about something like, Walt, don't talk about it, be about it. So
and
trying to do that.
Before I let you go, because I know you got another meeting coming up, you chair the Finance Committee on the Board of Education.
I chair personnel and I sit on the Finance Committee. Yes.
What are the key issues coming up with funding in the year ahead?
More money. It's always a challenge. The biggest issue for the town of Hamden around education has been the state of Connecticut under its ECS formula for years have been underfunding us by about $18 million a year. And one of the reasons why we're top 5 in the state for our mill rate is because the state government has failed in its funding of what they're supposed to give us by their own definition. So as a result, a mill in Hamden's worth about $3.4 million. So we've been missing out on $18 million a year. That's several mills right there. So working with the state to get some more money for education and ECS is always huge. And then also looking at ways that the state can contribute to funding special education, because we have an above average special education population. And
you want to centralize them. It's interesting. My daughter's a special ed teacher in Massachusetts, and there they spend part of the day separate and part of the day is integrated into classrooms. And that debate's gone back and forth. So is Hamden moving a direction where they don't integrate them in classrooms, become in a special place at Wintergreen?
We're trying to move it. where they're mainstream and they're in the same building as much as possible with traditional education. Now, I know, as you said, there is a debate, but the board's belief and kind of that debate, it's important to have those students. The goal is to get them mainstreamed and back in traditional classrooms if we can. So we think having the special ed students and traditional ed in the same building, there's benefits to both, and at a minimum, getting those students centralized so they're not spread out and all over the place would be huge for those families and those students.
Walter Livingston Morton IV. It was a real pleasure to meet you.
Hey, thank you. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me on the show this morning.
Thanks for coming on
enjoyed it.
Dateline Hamden. I hope you'll come back.
Absolutely.
Next
Thank
time
you,
we
Paul.
are going to attend board ed meetings when we start finding out where they're held.
Absolutely.
Because we went to the wrong location this week.
Let me know if you have any questions. Love to have you guys there.
Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks
to Yale New Haven Hospital for providing support for today's program. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD A Plea for Peace. Now, we know what it's like to be free. We just got to remember to book our flight. Fly free with us all day and all night long here at WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.